plate shattered into 100 jagged pieces as it hit the floor. The restaurant fell silent, all eyes turning to me as my hands trembled. My boss, Raymond, stormed out from behind the counter, his face twisted in rage. "That's the third one this week, Riley," he snapped, his voice a whip cracking against my frayed nerves. "Do you think plates grow on trees?" "I'm sorry," I stammered, bending down to pick up the shards. My fingers were raw from the constant scrubbing, the endless shifts, the late nights that never seemed to end. "You're always sorry," he sneered. "Maybe you should be sorry somewhere else." I froze. The words sank in slowly, like a poison spreading through my veins. "You're firing me?" My voice barely rose above a whisper. He scoffed. "It's not like you were doing much good here anyway. Grab your stuff and go." I swallowed the lump in my throat and straightened up. My apron felt like a noose as I untied it, my dignity unraveling with every movement. I could hear the whispers and feel the judgmental stares. I refused to let them see me break. Not here. Outside, the cold night air slapped me in the face. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't need to look. I knew what it was. A notification from the bank reminded me I was already drowning. The rent was due in 3 days. My fridge was empty. My car was one repair away from breaking down for good, and now I had no job. I leaned against the alley wall, breathing hard. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. I used to dream of more and making something of myself, of breaking free from this endless cycle of struggle. But dreams don't pay the bills. And right now I had nothing. By the time I reached my apartment, the eviction notice was already taped to my door. Final warning, it read in bold, heartless letters. I clenched my fists. How had it come to this? I had done everything right. Worked hard. Saved what little I could. Trusted the wrong person. I shoved the door open and grabbed the letter sitting on my tiny kitchen table. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. It was from Lucas. Lucas, my ex-boyfriend, my supposed partner, the man who swore we'd build a future together, until he drained my savings account and disappeared. "It's not what you think, Riley." That's what he had said when I confronted him. "I just needed a little help. I'll pay you back." That was 6 months ago. And now I had nothing left. I sank into the chair, my breath coming in ragged gulps. The walls felt like they were closing in. I couldn't stay here. I needed a way out. Desperation leads people to do reckless things. That's how I found myself sitting across from Victor Laurent. Victor was the kind of man people whispered about. Wealth dripped from his every movement. He had built an empire from nothing. Real estate, stocks, underground dealings no one dared to ask about. And now, I was about to make a deal with him. "I hear you're looking for an opportunity," Victor said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. I swallowed hard. "I need a job." His smirk was sharp as a blade. "No, Riley, you need money. There's a difference." I hated that he was right. He leaned forward. "Tell me, what are you willing to risk to change your life?" I hesitated because I already knew the answer. Everything. That night, I walked away with an offer. Victor wanted someone bold, someone who wasn't afraid to take risks, someone who was desperate enough to be dangerous. He handed me a single key. "If you're serious, meet me here tomorrow night." I gripped the key like it was my last lifeline. Whatever was behind that door would change my life forever. I just didn't know if it would be for better or worse. The key in my palm felt heavier than it should have, cold, metallic, humming with the weight of choices I hadn't even made yet. I stared at it under the flickering neon glow of my apartment's dying light bulb. Victor Laurent wasn't the kind of man you casually owed favors to. I knew that the second I walked into that meeting. He wasn't offering charity. He was offering opportunity. And opportunities for men, like Victor, always had a cost. The eviction notice on my counter told me I didn't have the luxury of saying no. By the next evening, I stood in front of a nondescript black door in a rundown industrial district. The air smelled of oil and asphalt, and the city's hum felt quieter here, like this place existed outside the rules of normal life. I pushed the key into the lock, turned it, and stepped inside. The room was nothing like I expected. It wasn't an office or some underground poker den. It was a warehouse lined with tables, where men in crisp suits and women in sleek dresses studied stock charts, reports, and cash flow projections on sleek monitors. It wasn't just money being made here. It was power. Victor was at the center of it all, his expression unreadable as he gestured for me to sit. "Welcome to your new life, Riley." Victor didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You're broke, desperate, but you're sharp," he said. "That's why you're here." I folded my arms, tried to steady my nerves. "And what exactly is here?" He smirked. "A proving ground." Over the next few weeks, I became a ghost, slipping between my old life and this new, dangerous world. I studied everything. How markets moved, how deals were made in shadows long before they ever touched the stock exchange, and how to leverage information like a weapon. It was a crash course in wealth building, except the rules weren't written in business textbooks. The first real test came fast. "There's an upcoming property auction," Victor explained one night, sliding a file across the table. "A failing chain of boutique hotels. The banks want to cut their losses. A perfect opportunity." I flipped through the documents, my pulse quickening. This was the kind of deal that could turn someone into a millionaire overnight, or ruin them just as fast. "You want me to bid?" I asked. Victor leaned back, watching me. "I want to see if you have the stomach for it." I didn't sleep the night before the auction. Every cent I could scrape together had gone into this. If I lost, I'd be worse off than before, buried in debt with nowhere to run. I arrived at the auction dressed in a thrift store blazer, the sleeves slightly too long, my confidence hanging by a thread. The room was filled with old money investors, their eyes scanning the crowd with the casual arrogance of people who never had to worry about making rent. I was out of my league, but I had something they didn't: desperation. The bidding started. I played it carefully, waiting, studying the room. Then, at the right moment, I jumped in. $500,000. Heads turned. $600,000. Another bidder countered. $650,000. I fired back without hesitation. The air was thick with tension. Going once, going twice. $800,000. My stomach dropped. I turned to see the speaker, Lucas, my ex. He was dressed sharper than I had ever seen him, standing beside a man in a charcoal suit who whispered something in his ear. My mind raced. Lucas didn't have that kind of money. He had stolen from me and disappeared. So whose pocket was he in now? I glanced at Victor, who gave me a slow, knowing nod. This wasn't just a business move. It was a test, and I wasn't going to lose. $850,000, I said, my voice steady. Lucas smirked. $1 million. A murmur ran through the room. I couldn't match it. I knew it. Lucas knew it. Sold, the auctioneer declared. My hands curled into fists. Lucas strolled past me as the crowd began to thin. "You should have stayed a waitress," he murmured before disappearing into the crowd. I had lost, but I stormed into Victor's office that night. Lucas was planted there. Victor didn't look surprised. Of course he was. I clenched my teeth. "You knew?" He leaned forward. "Lesson number 1, Riley. The game isn't fair. You thought you were playing against rich men. You were playing against the system. And you lost because you weren't prepared for war." I hated that he was right, but hate didn't pay debts. "You have 2 choices," he continued. "Walk away, or get back up and fight dirtier." I met his gaze, my anger turning to something sharper. "Show me how to win." Victor smiled. Wasn't done. For the next month, I rebuilt from the ground up. Victor connected me to silent investors, people who wanted returns but didn't want their names in the headlines. I learned how to move money where eyes didn't follow. Then came the real revenge. Lucas had won the hotel bid, but he didn't know what he had really bought. A series of anonymous reports leaked financial discrepancies about the deal. A quiet lawsuit emerged, questioning the legitimacy of his funds. I had done my research, followed the money, and exposed the cracks in his foundation. The hotel chain went under investigation. Lucas was summoned for questioning, and then one morning his assets were frozen. I was sipping coffee when the news broke. Lucas was ruined. But the war wasn't over. Just as I began to rise, the system pushed back. One morning, I woke up to banging on my door. 3 men in suits stood outside. "Riley Carter?" one of them asked. I nodded, my stomach twisting. "You're under investigation for financial fraud." The words crashed over me like a wave. I had played the game too well. Now, the system wanted me out. As they handed me a summons to appear in court, I realized something chilling. This wasn't about justice. This was a warning. Someone powerful wanted me gone, and they had just made the biggest mistake of their life. They had underestimated me. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and desperation. I sat stiffly in the defendant's chair, my heart pounding as the prosecution listed their accusations: fraud, insider trading, financial manipulation. Their words painted me as a criminal, a con artist who had cheated the system. I wanted to laugh at the irony. This same system had let Lucas steal my money and walk away. It had let my bosses underpay and overwork me. It has let billionaires bend the rules without consequence. But now that I had found a way to fight back, now they cared. "Miss Carter," the judge addressed me. "Do you have legal representation?" I clenched my fists. Lawyers cost money I didn't have. Victor had vanished, leaving me to fend for myself. But then, a voice rang from the back of the courtroom. "I'll be representing Miss Carter." A woman strode forward, confidence radiating from every step. She was tall, sharp-eyed, and dressed in a sleek navy blue suit. "Who the hell are you?" I muttered as she sat beside me. "Evelyn Shaw," she replied smoothly. "Your new attorney." I didn't hire her. I couldn't afford to. So why was she here? As if reading my mind, she leaned in. "You have powerful enemies, Miss Carter, but you also have powerful allies, ones you don't even know about yet." Evelyn wasted no time dismantling the prosecution's case. "Your Honor," she said, pacing in front of the jury, "Miss Carter is not the criminal here. She is the victim of a corrupt financial system designed to keep people like her from ever climbing the ladder." She turned to the lead prosecutor. "Let's talk about who really benefits from these accusations." One by one, she exposed the inconsistencies. The so-called fraudulent transactions were perfectly legal, just aggressive. The insider trading claim had no proof. And most importantly, the key witness against me, Lucas, who was now under investigation himself. By the time Evelyn was done, the case against me was crumbling. The judge sighed, rubbing his temples. "Without solid evidence, we have no grounds for conviction." Case dismissed. I had won, but Evelyn wasn't done. Outside the courthouse, she handed me a folder. "What's this?" I asked. "A second chance," she said. "You're smart, Riley, but you need to play the game on a bigger level. There's a way to turn this entire situation to your advantage." I opened the folder. Inside were documents detailing a series of under-the-table real estate deals. Some of the biggest developers in the city were buying properties at dirt-cheap prices from struggling businesses. Businesses they had intentionally pushed into financial ruin. And Lucas, he had been one of their pawns. "These developers are worth billions," Evelyn continued, "but their entire empire is built on deception. If someone were to say, exploit this knowledge, they could carve out their own empire." She met my gaze. This is how the real game is played. I took the folder and spent the next 2 weeks studying every detail. This wasn't just an opportunity. It was the opportunity. These developers thought they were untouchable, using loopholes and hidden deals to acquire property for pennies on the dollar. But loopholes work both ways. If I could predict their next moves, I could buy property before they manipulated the market. I could beat them at their own game. I just needed money. That's when Victor returned. I found him waiting in my apartment, leaning against my counter like he owned the place. "Miss me?" he smirked. I wanted to punch him. Instead, I threw the folder onto the counter. "I need investors," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "And why would I help you?" "Because," I said, "if you don't, someone else will. And when I win, I'll remember who stood in my way." Victor studied me for a long moment. Then he laughed. "Now, that is the attitude of someone ready to make real money." By the next morning, I had my first investors, silent partners who trusted Victor's judgment. I wasn't just playing the game now. I was about to change it. I started small. A handful of low-value properties were strategically chosen near areas these developers were eyeing. I made sure my purchases were invisible. Fake shell companies, private investors, anything to keep my name out of it. Then I watched. Just as expected, the developers started pushing businesses into financial distress, using their usual dirty tricks, raising tax assessments, manipulating local zoning laws, and creating artificial scarcity. And right before they could swoop in and buy the properties for nothing, I bought them first. At first, they didn't notice. A few deals falling through meant nothing to billionaires, until it happened again and again. Soon, they realized someone was outplaying them. That's when the real war began. The threat started subtly: anonymous calls, legal warnings, sudden tax audits. I ignored them. Then, one night, my apartment door was left ajar. Inside, everything was untouched, except for a single bullet placed on my kitchen table. A warning. I called Evelyn. "They know who I am," I said. "Good," she replied. "That means they're scared." But I knew I couldn't keep playing defense. I had to make a statement. So I set up a meeting. In a 5-star hotel conference room, I sat across from 3 of the wealthiest men in the city, the architects of the system that had nearly destroyed me. "You've been causing quite a stir, Miss Carter," one of them said, barely hiding his disdain. "That's the idea," I replied smoothly. Another one sneered. "You're in over your head. You have no idea how this world works." I leaned forward, smiling. "Actually," I said, "I know exactly how it works. That's why you're here. Try and buy me out before I take even more from you." Their silence was my answer. They had underestimated me. And now, they had no choice but to negotiate. By the time I walked out of that meeting, I was no longer just a player in the game. I was a threat. I secured controlling shares in key properties, leveraged political connections through Evelyn, and cut deals that locked the developers out of entire markets. What started as a desperate attempt to escape poverty had turned into something else entirely. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was winning. But victory comes with a price. One night, as I sat in my office, overlooking the city skyline, my phone buzzed. It was Victor. "We have a problem," he said, his voice uncharacteristically tense. I frowned. "What kind of problem?" There was a pause. Then he said something that sent a chill down my spine. "Lucas just got out of jail, and he wants revenge." The city skyline shimmered under moonlight, but my office felt colder than usual. I gripped my phone tighter. "Lucas is out?" I repeated, my voice level, though my heart pounded. "Yeah," Victor confirmed, "and he's not happy." I let out a slow breath, my mind already calculating possibilities. Lucas was a vengeful snake, petty, reckless, and most of all, desperate. He wouldn't stop at just ruining me. He wanted blood. "What's his move?" I asked. "He's been talking to the old developers you outplayed. They see him as a weapon against you." I clenched my jaw. Of course, they wanted payback. And Lucas? He was the perfect tool for the job. "I'll handle it," I said. "You sure?" Victor sounded wary. "He's dangerous." "So am I." By the next morning, the attack had begun. News outlets were flooded with stories painting me as a con artist, a ruthless manipulator who had built her empire on deception. Old pictures of me as a waitress surfaced online, twisted into some fabricated rags to riches scandal. Then came the legal threats, lawsuits from companies I had outmaneuvered, investigations into my acquisitions, fines and audits. They weren't trying to beat me in business. They were trying to drown me in red tape. At the center of it all, Lucas. He was giving interviews, spinning lies about how I had stolen from him, how I had always been a scheming social climber. I watched one of his press conferences from my office. Lucas stood in front of a microphone, wearing an expensive suit he clearly hadn't earned. "Riley Carter destroyed my life," he said, voice dripping with false sincerity. "She framed me, ruined my business, and left me to rot in prison. Now she's pretending to be some kind of self-made success." He shook his head. She's nothing but a fraud. My fists clenched. I had worked too hard for this. I wasn't about to let a man like him take it all away. It was time to go on the offensive. I called Evelyn. "We need to hit back," I said. "Hard." She smirked. "I was hoping you'd say that." We spent the next 48 hours assembling our response, digging up dirt. Lucas had skeletons in his closet, ones I intended to bring into the light. We found records of fraudulent transactions, offshore accounts, and evidence that he had bribed officials before his arrest. Flipping the script. If they wanted a PR war, I'd give them one. We released a full expose detailing how Lucas and the developers had worked together to bankrupt small businesses. Legal chess. The lawsuits they had thrown at me, we countersued. But not just for defamation, for conspiracy, fraud, and financial sabotage. Then I made my boldest move yet. I called a press conference. Cameras flashed as I stepped onto the stage, dressed in a sleek black dress and exuding confidence. I looked directly into the cameras. For years, people like Lucas Montgomery and his wealthy backers have manipulated the system, destroying lives while enriching themselves. I began. They assumed no one could stop them. I smiled. They were wrong. I laid out everything. The backdoor deals, the financial corruption, the manipulation of laws to steal from the working class. Lucas Montgomery claims I ruined him. I said, pause and let the words sink in. But let's be clear. Lucas Montgomery was a criminal before I ever came into the picture. The only difference is that now the world knows it. I turned my head slightly. Lucas, if you're watching this, I suggest you start running. Lucas underestimated how much evidence we had. By the end of the week, he was under federal investigation. His assets were frozen. His so-called allies abandoned him, and his name became synonymous with fraud. When reporters finally caught up with him, he was hiding in a hotel lobby, sweat beading down his face. Mr. Montgomery, do you have a response to the allegations? A journalist asked. Lucas stammered, looking around desperately. I was set up, he tried to argue. This is all a lie. But no one believed him. By the time he was arrested, he wasn't just ruined, he was erased. But I wasn't done yet. The real players, the billionaires who would try to destroy me, were still standing. I met them at a high-rise office overlooking the city. The very people who had laughed at me just months ago, they didn't look amused now. You've made powerful enemies, Miss Carter. One of them sneered. You think you've won? I leaned forward. I know I've won. I slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents exposing their illegal dealings. These are copies, I said. The originals? They're with the authorities. Their faces paled. Here's the deal, I continued. You can keep fighting me, but it won't end well for you. Or you can walk away. Sell me your remaining shares, leave the city and disappear. They glared at me, but they had no choice. One by one, they signed. By the time the dust settled, I was no longer just a wealthy businesswoman. I was a kingmaker. I owned entire blocks of the city. I had politicians on my side. I wasn't just surviving in their world. I was rewriting the rules. And yet, I knew this wasn't over, because power attracts enemies. I had won the battle. But the war, it was just beginning. That night, I stood in my penthouse, staring at the city I now controlled. Then my phone buzzed. A message. You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming. See you soon. Ed? My blood ran cold. Lucas was gone. So, who the hell was Elle? The message was still on my phone screen, glowing like a warning in the dark. You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming. See you soon. Ed? I read it 3 times, my mind racing. Lucas was gone. So who the hell was Elle? I tapped a quick message to Victor. Find out who sent this. Now. Then, I set the phone down and looked out over the city. Even after all this, after the battles, betrayals, and victories, someone was still lurking in the shadows, watching. And if they thought they could take me down, they had no idea who they were dealing with. 2 days later, Victor stormed into my office, his expression grim. You're not going to believe this, he said, tossing a folder onto my desk. I flipped it open and felt my stomach drop. The name on the first page? Lillian Montgomery, Lucas's older sister. I should have known. Unlike her brother, Lillian had never been reckless or impulsive. She had always played the long game, working in the background while Lucas made a mess in the spotlight. And now that he was gone, she was stepping forward. She's been buying up stock in smaller companies, funneling money through offshore accounts. Victor continued. She's not just coming after you, Riley. She's building an army. I exhaled sharply. So this was it. The real war was about to begin. Lillian wanted to test me? Fine. I decided to remind the world exactly who I was. That weekend, I hosted an exclusive gala, one so extravagant that it made headlines before it even began. The venue? A historic mansion overlooking the city, once owned by one of the very billionaires I had outmaneuvered. The guest list? Senators, CEOs, media moguls, investors who had once ignored me, but now needed me, people who controlled industries, wealth, and influence. When I stepped onto the grand staircase, the entire room turned to watch. I had gone from being a struggling waitress to commanding the attention of the world's elite. Lillian wanted to play chess. I was about to flip the entire board. At the peak of the night, I took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, letting my voice carry to the hall. Tonight isn't just about celebration, it's about legacy. I let that word sink in before continuing. Years ago, I was serving tables, working double shifts just to keep the lights on. People looked at me and saw nothing but a struggling woman with no future. I smiled. Now, I own half the buildings in the city. I decide which businesses rise and which ones fall. I don't just play the game, I make the rules. A quiet murmur spread through the crowd. But power means nothing if you don't use it wisely, I continued. And that's exactly what I plan to do. I turned toward the press cameras. To anyone watching who has ever been told they weren't good enough, that they didn't belong, I want you to remember something. I leaned in slightly, my voice steady. The world only respects two things, power and results. And I promise you, if you work smart, if you outthink and outmaneuver, you can rewrite your story just like I did. The room erupted into applause. And just like that, my empire was no longer just about wealth. It was about influence. As I stepped down from the stage, I felt her presence before I even saw her. Lillian Montgomery. She stood near the back, wearing a sharp white suit, her expression unreadable. You have quite the talent for speeches, she said, her voice smooth. And you have quite the talent for hiding in the background. I shot back. She smirked. You think you won? I know I have. She chuckled. Oh, Riley, power shifts like the tide. Enjoy it while it lasts. Then she leaned in closer. Because I promise you, I'll be the wave that drowns you. I stared at her, unfazed. You're welcome to try. That night, as I stood in my penthouse, I reflected on everything. The betrayals, the struggles, the rise from nothing to empire. Lillian was right about one thing. Power did shift. But I wasn't just someone who got lucky. I had built my wealth with strategy, patience, and intelligence. And if there was one lesson I had learned, it was that power doesn't belong to those who wait. It belongs to those who take it. And I wasn't done taking. Riley Carter's journey wasn't just about money. It was about resilience, strategy, and proving doubters wrong. Wealth isn't just about working hard. It's about working smart. So if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been told you'll never make it, remember this. You don't have to play by their rules. You can write your own. Drop a comment below. What would you do if you had unlimited power? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because the next story might just change your life.